Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Mad Sports Radio. Martino Puccio here by myself in the Murphy booth at Iona College. Okay, this week actually, there was news that David Wright had a shoulder impingement, which basically means he's not able to throw the ball. It was considered a challenge for him because they said back a while ago after he was recovering from his spinal stenosis and his neck injury that it's just been a disaster the past 2 seasons. But they were saying that David wasn't going to be ready to throw the ball until he actually threw the ball, which basically meant that they didn't know how his shoulder would react or how his body would react to it. So he started throwing and he just felt illness in his shoulder. They sent him back to New York and they're going to reevaluate him in a couple weeks. But there weren't too many high expectations on David anyways coming into this season because the Mets figured that if he was here for the season and he was playing, then that was just a bonus. They were kind of going into the season expecting if they could get anything out of David at all, then it would be a plus. But the reason I'm talking about this is I think it's finally time for David to hang up the cleats. He's played under 100 games the past couple seasons. Ever since he moved, the Mets have moved to Citi Field. His numbers have declined rapidly. There was theories that it was because the Citi Field was so massive when they first moved in there. He tried to become a power guy instead of just staying the same. Doubles in the gaps, home runs when they came to him kind of hitter, and that just didn't transition. There was the head injury with Matt Cain when he got hit in the head back in 2009. Then the injury of the pop-up play with Ike Davis was also another disaster, and a lot of people are just pretty much saying that he's the Don Mattingly for the Mets, which if most of you don't know, if any of you don't know, Don Mattingly was one of the better Yankee players in the 1980s, former MVP, Gold Glove winner. Never eventually made it to a World Series with the Yankees or even won it. He retired just before that dynasty started up in the mid to late 90s. The sad thing here with David was, as a Mets fan, he was one of the more talented players that ever came out of their system. He leads them in so many major statistical categories. It was just awesome to get him back in 2015 when I was at Game 3 of the World Series when he hit a home run. The guy just worked so hard. He could have left the Mets after in the early 2010s, but he decided to re-sign here even though the team was not going to be good for years. It just his loyalty. Many Mets fans really appreciate him sticking it through instead of what happened with Jose Reyes, it could have been a disaster, even though Reyes never got a contract offer. But the point being is that David Wright was a consummate professional. Every single year he's been here ever since he came up when he was around 21 years old, when Piazza was still on the team. He was fantastic. He could have won MVP in 2007 if the Mets didn't even collapse. He was definitely a candidate for sure. It's just been a very sad story, and the fact that he's having trouble just throwing the ball, forget about all the prep he does a couple hours prior to the game, just to get out on the field, just a chance to play, not even about producing and catching up to 95-mile-an-hour fastballs, which it seems that almost every single pitcher is throwing 95 these days. It's just getting really sad, and at this point, he is costing the Mets almost around $20 million a year, around that figure, and at some point, you just have to think to yourself, he might just be hurting the team if he's not going to be able to get out on the field, and he's costing the team $20 million a year. The Mets have other holes. They have bullpen holes. They have holes around the field. There's possible catcher issues if Travis d'Arnaud doesn't produce this season. And at one point, David might just have to sit down and evaluate that maybe he should hang up the cleats, or if not, try and figure something out with his salary, because at this point, if he's not a guarantee to stay on the field and he's getting paid all this money, what good is he doing for the team? And he wants to win, and he's reiterated how he wants to win, and I think he deserves a shot to win because he's stayed with the Mets all those years when they were perennial losers, year in, year out, absolutely no chance of any playoff hopes at all. But he stuck through it. He had a big hit against the Dodgers in the playoffs in 2015, but he just really hasn't been on track for the Hall of Fame like everyone thought he was before he turned 30. So I think the thing here for David is maybe just sit down, Father Time catches up to everyone. Unfortunately for him, it caught up to him faster than others, and he might just have to retire probably, who knows, maybe at the end of spring training, if it's really that big of an issue with his shoulder and his back obviously isn't going to cooperate, because I doubt even he would be able to play 100 games in a season, because like I said earlier in the segment, that he hasn't even played 100 games the past couple seasons in total. So I think it's just something very difficult that he's going to have to cope with, that almost every athlete has to cope with, but his happens sooner rather than later, and unfortunately for him, it doesn't look like it's going to get much easier for him the rest of his career. So I'm Martino Puccio. Please like, subscribe to the channel, comment on your thoughts. Think if David should maybe hang up the cleats or maybe try and renegotiate his contract, or whatever way the Mets can try and figure something out for him to do, because it seems like the end is near. I'm Martino Puccio. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.